BruCast is back, baby.
This BruCast episode is brought to you by the BruCast store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now bru-cast.com/store. Link below. Hi everyone, welcome back to another BruCast episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BruCast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Our guest today is Leo Koesters. How are you doing, Leo?
I'm great. I'm glad to be on here. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Oh man, thanks so much for being here. It's an honor. We've been talking about this episode for a while. Had to reschedule, had to postpone, but now we are here. Everything's fine.
Yes, finally.
So you're also from Germany, right?
Yes, I am. I'm from Cologne, Germany. Been living there since like 10 years. So originally from the northern Westphalia. Shout out to my hometown Rheine. And yes.
So you're... Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Moved to Cologne 10 years ago for studying purposes. And now I've stayed here in this very adventurous city.
All right. I've been to Cologne a couple of times, and man, it's. I would say adventure is a good word for it. You guys have the cathedral, right? It's immense. It's beautiful. And once per year, there's the carnival, and everything just gets crazy.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty much Cologne in a nutshell. That's what it's known for. So, yeah. There are a lot of things to discover in the city itself, and which is why I just love staying here. What you've been up to when you're in Cologne? Did you go to Carnival?
Very briefly, because I was passing by, right? I was catching a train. I think I was coming back from Belgium. Yeah, I was coming back from Belgium, and my train stopped in Cologne for 2 or 3 hours, something like that. But and it's a funny story because I was like, okay, I'm in Cologne. I saw on the Google Maps that the cathedral was like 1 minute from the main station. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out. As soon as I get out of the train, Leo, I just see like people dressed up as Star Wars characters, like you name it. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? It was like astronaut. It felt like I took a LSD, I was in LSD trip, but it was fun. And then I went outside and partied for 30 minutes, and then I came back. But that's it.
Okay, yeah. That's very, very matching to Cologne. A lot of spontaneity and a lot of people just being who they truly want to be, like with all the trade fairs, that they can just express themselves as they want. The LGBTQ community is quite big, and a lot of people just discovering who they truly are, I guess.
Berlin is a good city for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Berlin also, and I've thought about this quite a bit, like why it is, and I think it's just the anonymity of the big cities. So just because there is so many people, you can break outside certain barriers. But when you are fixed in your little small town, it's rather tough to break out and be act outside of your normal way of behaving. And I think this is why you can just develop yourself. And I think this applies to many areas, because if you really want to make it big in some regard, or if you really want to grow, it's like you couldn't be doing this at your small hometown, I mean, at least in the history, maybe the internet breaks down some barriers to that, but overall, it's just like if you want to make it big, you got to go to the big city, right?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, the internet's changing a little bit that landscape, but I agree with you. A friend of mine once told me she came up with this quote, and I thought it made perfectly sense. People go to big cities in search of something. People go to smaller cities to build something. In this case, like
Mm-hmm.
when you're older and have a family, something like that. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
Oh yeah, that's a very, very smart thing to say. To seek something and to build something. A couple of days I was talking to my co-founder about it, and he was like, "Okay, would you rather live in a big city or would you live in a small like land house area type of village?" And we were basically coming to the same conclusion that it's okay if you want to get inspired. It's nice to go to the big city, but if you just want to be very calm, relaxed, build something, reflect for yourself, come to some new conclusions. It's just very nice to be living in a small village for some time, or just maybe even going on a retreat, living in the mountains somewhere. So yeah, there's a merit to living in both different areas. So
Yeah. So I guess you need to find a sweet spot, right? Like a small town close to a big city. I think that's the dream everyone wants.
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You know what? I've been watching a lot recently on YouTube. Those guys who buy minivans and they renovate those minivans into living spaces, something like that. And one of them, he was from San Francisco, right? San Francisco, I heard that the rent is crazy high. So the guy just renovated his van and he parked on like this parking lot, not that far away from the city. And he would just live there and take the train to work and then go to the gym to shower. And that was his life. But he was basically parked close to the big city, and not paying rent, which is quite smart, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, quite a few people do this. I also read of one guy was even an investment banker who was living in the outskirts of London, having to drive several hours there just because rent is sort of unaffordable. I mean, it makes sense. A friend of mine who works in investment banking, he lives in a shared apartment in the city of London, so it's like no one can afford to live on their own unless you're really wealthy or have built up quite a bit of wealth or whatever. So yeah, this is really weird about the big cities. I mean, who is even living there, in the very center of it? At least with the mega cities. In Cologne, I think it's still somewhat okay, but you still see the development that in the very center, very fewer and fewer people are able to afford living, So
Yeah, I saw a chart yesterday. The difference between the average income and the average rent. And you see, like, I think in the 70s, they were kind of in the same point. And then over time, they just start separating more and more and more. The average rent going high. Sorry, not rent. I think the average house price. That's what I meant. Just start going higher, and the like average salary just barely increasing. It's crazy.
yeah, that's true. I've seen that also in the regards of how much yearly salaries you need to buy a house, and back in the 60s, 70s, it was something like 8 years salary. So Warren Buffett bought the house he still lives in for like 60K and paid like back then it was several years of income, but now it's like I think something 20 to 30 years of income you have to pay for a house. So this is another comparison where it's just exploding. It's obnoxious. I feel there are multiple factors coming into play, but yeah, just widening the money supply and a lot of people seeing houses as assets nowadays. This is what it comes down to mostly. So.
Yeah. I'm getting depressed, Leo, so let's change the subject.
Well, sure, maybe it's depressing in a sense, but it's also asking for alternatives, what else you can be doing, you know, and maybe we are not destined to be living in the same place all the time, and the concept of owning a house itself is like somewhat old, out of fashion, you know. So like there was a very on Finanzfluss, the German YouTuber, you probably know him, right?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay. So he's a German finance YouTuber, and he once had a very wealthy manager who runs his own investment fund, and he says, okay, the reason that I'm living in my own bought flat is, I mean, obviously he can afford it, but he was doing so, he said for himself, out of emotional reasons. So it's not like an investment anymore in a stricter sense, and like the concept of you just pay too much when you want to keep a house if you renovate it all the time, you know. And nowadays with globalization, people are also moving quite a bit, so I don't know. I think the concept of owning a house is somewhat getting out of fashion, and it's certainly not an investment anymore like back in the days.
Yes, and the problem of where you're gonna live when you're retired is that this is your problem, right? Like that for me, the way I see it, that's the biggest advantage of owning a house, is that at some point your salary, you're gonna retire, your salary won't be the same anymore, and you need a place to live. And if you keep paying for the rent after you retire, like that's basically all your retirement money. That's where it's going.
Yeah, that's a big point, right? Sure.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Anyway, I don't know what you're talking about. So you went to Cologne.
I mean, what is until that time, until we both come in that age, there will be a lot of things happening. So who knows how life will be at that point. So you were about to ask me something about Cologne.
Yes. So you moved to Cologne about 10 years ago. And
yes,
did you knew at the time what you're pursuing when you went there?
Not really, in the sense that, so I switched from economics to social sciences just because I found it more interesting. So economics was quite a bit about mathematics and making predictions, analyzing economic data, and I was rather interested in like politics, humanities, basically how people behave really. So I switched to social sciences, started studying in Cologne, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life, so I was just following my intuition of learning about it. And this is also how I approach my job life, you know, this far. I mean, right now I'm founding a startup, but my road to it has been sort of influenced by so many things, and I'm really grateful and glad about it, because a lot of people are just starting a startup because it seems like cool or is something that they want to do, but they don't have really a story behind it or a purpose-driven endeavor, you know. I mean, when I was looking for co-founders, I was talking to this one guy who was just listening throughout the call and didn't say much. So I checked out his LinkedIn, and he had like 6 different positions as a co-founder, and each of them had lasted for like half a year. So and I was
sounds safe.
and he was jumping from like one hype topic to the next, so at first he was doing crypto, then he was doing e-commerce, then he was doing biotech, then he was doing this and he was doing that. So I feel like I found my purpose, but it's been a 10-year journey really, so a lot of factors coming into play. So back when I was 20, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that I was really interested in human behavior and how humans interact, I guess. So
That's very interesting. But wait a second. What about this scammer? It was a scammer, right? Basically.
Nah, he wasn't a scammer. This dude, he just worked on a several bunch of different projects, and in the startup scene, it's normal to be switching quite a bit and to be working on different projects at the same time. At least to some extent. But
Okay.
I think this only happens when you're not really committed to your endeavor, if you're really committed to what you're doing, why just not focus on one project and go all out, So
Yeah, that makes more sense. I think Steve Jobs said that in life, you're just able to do so much things. So, like, certain amount of things. You cannot do it all. You cannot be the best guitar player, the best bodybuilder, So you really need to focus on a few things and accordingly to him, try to do them very well. And I kind of resonate with that.
yeah, definitely. Sure, you can be experimenting here and there, but to some extent, it leads all down to finding your central purpose, And I feel like I found it in the sense that I want to understand human behavior and then more specifically better mental health care worldwide. So that has been my journey.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just been a long journey of discovery and always staying curious. And although I have learned a lot of different things in my life, I feel like a lot of what I've done has contributed to this endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
So.
What is so interesting about the human behavior, in your opinion?
Well, I would say that a lot of people underestimate how much you can influence certain situations, but in a good way if you're coming from pure intentions. So it's like a lot of times people, they get really anxious or they get really aggressive, and sure there's only so much you can control, but with like meditation, for example, you can really center yourself and then you can make a move in the right direction. And this calming of the mind is really crucial in mental health. So there are several different ways of doing this. Meditation is just one facet. And so I guess understanding human behavior is obviously quite fascinating, because you can see what you can control from your own side, but also in interaction, social psychology, for example, quite fascinating topic. And it just goes into any area of our lives, really, if we are being honest about it, because it's about the way we communicate, it's about the way we work, it's about the way we love, it's about the way we found our partners, and it's about what we do from ourselves. But it's also how we interact with each other, how others react to us, or how we react to what others have been reacting to. So they're just it's very fascinating, and it stems from philosophy. Philosophy has developed into psychology, and every field you can imagine has contributed to it. It's about understanding language, it's about understanding patterns, mathematics also to some degree, statistics. So it's very multifaceted approach to understanding, so which keeps it very interesting to study social sciences, psychology, human behavior. So
Yeah, that's true. It affects everything. That's very interesting.
Mm.
I heard once that I'm not sure if it's true. I'm gonna ask you that the brain, it's not fully understood. It's not fully studied. We don't know all the things that the brain's doing. Is that the case? Is this real?
Sure, sure. I mean, there's very little what we do understand about the brain. And it's just like very tough to be proving something, you know, because it's like you can only see when work with correlations, which means that, for example, when you do a brain scan, you can see, okay, when a person is planning ahead, this area is particularly active, right? So, but then you don't have a reason behind it. It's like, okay, why is it particularly active? And even more importantly, what's the mechanism behind it? What's exactly happening throughout the different areas? And all this is just really at the beginning, because only a few decades ago, brain scans have started happening, and you can really delve deeper into human behavior. So one of the way I got really interested was that they put a Buddhist monk into a brain scan, and
What?
they
That sounds wrong.
I mean, that sounds wrong, but he did it for the sake of science, you know.
All right. Okay. Okay.
So his father was like very one of the most intellectual regarded guys in France, and this guy Mathieu Ricard, he started his PhD at someone who had just won the Nobel Prize in biology. So he was studying, and then he discovered Buddhism, and then he quit everything, even though he was half done, and became a Buddhist monk in the Tibetan in Tibet.
Wow.
And very fascinating story. So I read about him like about 10 years ago, and this is how I really got interested in like meditation and mental health, because I figured, okay, they put him into a brain scan, and they figured, okay, there are certain areas of his brain that are, so you can meditate about compassion, for example, and then when he was meditating about compassion, certain areas of his brain were more active than others. So that was really fascinating to see. And then like the pop press titled him the happiest man on earth, but it's like, okay, I mean, how do you measure happiness, you know? Like, I don't know if he himself would even call himself the happiest man on earth, but you get the point. It's like he leads a certain lifestyle, he meditates a lot. You can be doing a brain scan and see, okay, in which way does he really have measurable differences in his brain, you know, which is quite fascinating. I think we're just at the beginning of it. I mean, Elon is doing some stuff with NeuraLink about it, about have you gotten into it?
I saw like the monkey playing Tetris or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's been even a few years ago. This monkey was playing Tetris. Maybe you want to show it to the viewers.
Of course, let's take a look. So it was this was with the link thing, NeuraLink.
Way like,
Oh,
oh my
one
god,
second.
like,
Yeah.
how did we
NeuraLink,
got
yeah,
here?
NeuraLink.
It's crazy.
Okay, 1 second, guys. How to look for it? So monkey.
And NeuraLink.
I don't.
Neura.
I got
Mhm.
link. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yes. And you see, it's like
So for those, oh, there's an ad. 1 second.
Und irgendwelche
Sorry. Okay, so for those just listening, let's describe what's happening. Damn, what's going on? There's another ad. So annoying. There you go. Now you're seeing it.
yes.
So it's like a cage, right? Like
Yeah.
and there's a TV in front of the monkey. And he's like, there's a tube and he's eating something out of the tube, I guess. And there's also a remote. I mean, isn't that supposed to be, isn't he supposed to be using his brain? Why he's using the remote?
Well, he uses the joystick at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
So his task is to catch this ball that is flying around with the to bring the ball into the orange field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he can direct it. And every time he does it successfully, he gets a little bit of banana juice through the and
Okay.
so he's getting a little reward, and this way I think you can already see him getting faster, right? He works faster because he gets a reward. And now you can see the screen where they apparently measure his brain activity.
That's crazy. Well, let's see. This was 3 years ago.
Yes, right. And now maybe you want to show like the newest update, which is also on NeuraLink's side. It's like there's a man sitting in a wheelchair who can on YouTube channel NeuraLink.
Oh, okay.
I think they uploaded it there. I saw it on X the other day. So there's a guy who is like full paralysis. Yes,
I've seen this one. That's
yeah.
impressive. Yeah. But
That's
let's just describe it for the listeners.
Yeah. So there's a guy in whole paralysis, and he's unable to move, sitting in a wheelchair, and he has a chess computer in front of him. And he is able to direct the chess game just with the power of his thoughts, basically, because he is interconnected. his brain, I guess, to the computer. And yeah, I mean, I haven't delved too much into the mechanism behind it. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a psychology student, social scientist. But it's quite fascinating to see that he can basically direct a game of chess with his thoughts while being fully paralyzed.
Dude, that's like sci-fi level shit. It's incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
He's basically doing what the monkey's doing, but without the banana slurp, right?
Yeah. Maybe you cannot compare both exactly, because on the one hand it's the monkey is getting a reward, and guy is directing his the board game, and doesn't get a reward, but yeah, you get the gist of it. You can really measure neural activity, brain activity at a deep level. You can train a monkey this way, like in a game of computer game, and yeah, also quite fascinating to see that someone can direct a game of chess, just tech-based, even though he wasn't able to do so before, and just very, very enabling experience for him.
Yeah, that's amazing, because let's think a little bit all the things that he can do. So he can move stuff around with his mind. He can click, because he needs to click and then click and move, or I guess because he needs to drag the pieces, right? If he can do that, imagine what was the name of Stephen Hawking. Imagine if Stephen Hawking was alive nowadays. I don't know if you get one of those, but it would be life changing. He was already like writing those texts and having the robot voice read them to him. But oh my God, that's I can already even see the next step. So right now you can already move stuff. I think the next step would be to decipher your thoughts into words. Right? Is this even possible?
I think this something. So you mean that you can transfer what you think into written words, like write it out?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something like this already, like a year ago, that has already been built, like a chip in your brain that can transfer what you think to written word. That's already existent. I think I read about this like a year ago in some research paper, and I found that quite fascinating. So, but I don't know how close they are actually to executing it, or if they have just done some research about it. Very fascinating. So you don't have to. You can dictate your thoughts. You don't even have to speak. No voice to text. Thought to text is used.
Damn, that's so cool. That's so cool. But but you know, I wouldn't trust the first versions. Imagine you get one of those things installed, and then they say, "Oh, you want the update, motherfucker? You should pay the DLC," and then you don't, you know, because we are getting if we keep going into this road, I can totally see we getting into this dystopian future where companies basically own pieces of your brain, because this thing will become, that's my vision, right? The next smartphone, probably everyone will have one of those. Over time, they probably will be as easy as like AirPods. You just put it in your ear or behind your ear. I don't know, like in 50 years from now. I'm just speculating, right? And then everyone will have one of those. Dude, I don't know. It's just mind blowing. I'm just going crazy here.
Yeah, it's just fascinating what is happening throughout the last 2 years in tech. I mean, with the invention of AI, with brain chip implants, I mean, we are just very much exploding tech-wise. But it's also, I don't know, I feel like right now there's a lot of hype, and it's great, and a lot of things are happening. But there's like some prediction that research institute by the name of Gartner, they already did in 2017, which was like, okay, you get all this new tech, and they even foresaw all the things like AI and brain chip implants, and you were getting up to this top of hype, and people were just getting more and more excited. I mean, how much crazier does it get than getting some chips implanted into your brain? But then the hype gets lower once you see, okay, all the further technologies cannot keep up with that, and even brain chip implants might not spread as fast as possible. So I don't know if Gartner's accurate on that, but the last 7 years they have been quite accurate with all the tech developing. So I mean, we'll see. We have exciting times ahead of us.
Oh, for sure. That AI, like, there's so many things that are about to completely drastically change humanity. Space exploration, like all of those things. I cannot imagine how life will be in 20 years. I really cannot. Because, like, if you ask people before the internet, most people didn't even knew what a computer was. And then the computer came and the internet came and completely changed how we communicate with each other. And no one no one saw that coming. You can see like interviews on YouTube that they did back in the days. Like, do you know what a computer is? Do you like? They don't know. Like, and I talked with people who lived before this era, this huge technological era. They said it's like, bro, it's like a different reality. No one saw it coming. So I really don't know what to expect in 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and it all went so fast, you know, in a couple of years. And I feel like it was just like, it was a result of a couple of people just working really hard. And I mean, not only a couple of people, obviously millions of people, but I've been following the startup scene for quite a while. And like 3-4 years ago, there was like Peter Thiel, one of the first investors in Facebook, and he said, yeah, you know, back when the first moon landing happened, we were promised flying cars and all we got was 140 characters, which was a joke about Twitter.
Oh man.
And I mean, now we are way beyond flying cars, I guess, you know. I mean, flying cars are there with Lilium, a startup. They are working on flying taxis for the last couple of years, you know, so we are beyond that.
Yeah, I had met you on the show the other day, and man, we talked about, I think, for half an hour about flying taxis. I didn't know this was a thing. It's crazy, but it's for now. It's just for the uber rich, right? I think they're going to start releasing those services.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a service that is for the super rich. It's something that you know, this German startup investor Frank Thelen from Höhle der Löwen. Maybe you've heard of him.
No.
Like, okay. So he's a German investor, and he has been involved with this taxi startup for a couple of years. It's called Lilium, and they basically work on a flying taxi, and the aim is to make it transportation for people worldwide, you know, so it's not like a service for the super rich. I mean, it's rather about disrupting transportation as far as I'm concerned. But I haven't been following the startup for a while, so yeah, that's it. Maybe it's a service that the super rich also would use, but the question is it going to be so much faster, or is it just going to be very much more convenient, you know? So
it would be very much way cool.
yeah, I think now we got the connection again, right?
Yeah, we're back.
We're back. Okay.
So Leo, I wanted to ask you something. What is neurodivergency, and when this term came to be?
Yeah, it's a term, neurodiversity, which came to life in the 80s, and it was just empowering about people that have different perceptions of the world, basically. So you can argue a lot about, for example, the most common ones are that fall under the umbrella term of neurodiversity, ADHD and autism. So you can argue a lot if ADHD and autism, if they are a disorder, or if people with ADHD and autism are disabled, or if they are not disabled. And it boils down to a lot of controversy, because some people consider it a disorder for themselves, others don't want to be considered disabled. Certainly it is a disorder, because this is just a medical term of something not being in order. But there you come to neurodiversity. If you say something is not in order, and it's something that you're born with ADHD and autism, so you give the person something, okay, you are not in order from the point that you are born. And this is where the concept of neurodiversity comes in, because it's about, okay, maybe you are fine the way you are, but you just perceive the world with different eyes. So your neural perception is diverse, neurodiversity. You see the world with different eyes, and it certainly is true in the sense that there's scientific evidence for it, you know. So people, for example, with ADHD, they have some time blindness. It's hard for them to track time, which is bad in quite a few circumstances, but it's actually really good when they are highly interested in something. Time just flies by. And with autism, they are very good at detecting patterns, you know, so which is why, for example, they are often hired as mathematical analysts, and they can structure information in a really efficient way. And yeah, even though there are some underlying challenges for people with ADHD and autism, they have their unique strengths, and therefore you say neurodiversity. And yeah, with other disorders, I have not gotten too deep into them psychologically, but ADHD and autism, this is some, let's say, weak strengths and weaknesses when it comes to ADHD and autism that are typical for people with ADHD and autism. Yeah.
So they are not considered disabilities, just divergency. That's how you pronounce it, divergency?
Well, it depends on the level of severity, you know.
Okay.
So, for example, I think with autism this gets clear the easiest. So there are some people who have autism who cannot speak at all because and oftentimes, okay, they didn't get enough speech activation training as a child. And there are some people with autism who can speak fully, who are quite okay at communicating. I mean, Elon Musk has stated he has Asperger's, you know, which is also autism. So so it can be a disability, or it can, you don't consider it a disability. It also boils down to different countries. In some countries you perceive it this way, and in some ways others. So I was having a call with a guy from Japan, and he was asking me how it is considered in Germany, for example, because in Japan it is considered completely different, you know.
So how different? How different?
Well, he didn't tell me about how it is perceived in Japan, but at least I told him how it is perceived in Germany. It was just a weird situation because there were two Japanese guys on the call, and they were talking Japanese. And I was like, okay, what is this about, you know? But I really am in good contact with him. He's ADHD autism expert from Japan. He always translates my tweets into Japanese, which is quite funny. So the first time I discovered this, it was like really crazy, you know, because you have this, I don't know, what maybe I'm curious to know what are the two most funny things you can remember about your social media career this far. But for me, definitely it has been one time my Twitter account just quadrupled within a couple of hours because I was making a comment under some hedge fund billionaire guy, and he commented and followed me, and he didn't follow me, but he liked my reply and said it's an honor to be followed by you. So, and then I got like my count quadrupled within a very short time. That was very memorable, and also writing on Twitter and getting like all of the sudden I have my tweet quoted and it's like Japanese translation. That was so funny. When you have like 1.7k followers, you never expect something like this to be happening, you know?
So half of your followers are Japanese now, basically.
I don't know. Quite a few of them already, you know? So
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so
what would you say?
what?
I'm just curious to know about you. What have been the two most memorable moments of your social media career this far?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Can you recall too?
I guess. Let me. No one ever asked me this question, Leo. So that's a first. Let me think about it. Ooh, you know, BruCast is not that old. I think I've been working on BruCast for 1 year now, 1 year and a few months. So it's a very short life as a podcaster, my career as a podcaster so far. But there was so many highlights. Like I have this phrase like baby steps, right? I take it slow, but I like to do gradual progress. And so when I got the audio interface, that was like, for me, it was like a huge moment. Like, no, I'm podcast. When I got the background. So by the way, guys who are watching on YouTube, I have a background now. Like, this was a huge achievement for me. Like, yeah, like the podcast is taking shape, you know. But if I had to pin down like the highlights so far, I'm sure there will be many more, but so far, when was I got Baptiste Friscourt on the podcast. This was a very interesting podcast. Have you heard about Baptiste before?
No, but I'm curious to know.
So he worked in France. He's a French art teacher, but he also worked for a website called The Brief. This website, so he's a correspondent for The Brief, and this website he covers several types of news, but I think the biggest ones are like UFOs and aliens. And The Brief is where the whistleblower David Grush came. So David Grush approached The Brief last year to whistleblow, to confess all the secrets, all the things that were going behind the scenes in the U.S. government. So how many crafts they have, how many is like how many species, like so many interesting details. And after that he approached The Brief, he was then on News Nation, where he gave this explosive interview, which was the catalyst of like the public hearing that happened last year. So going back to Baptiste was in the middle of this whole thing, and he knows so much about the UFO history. He's a very knowledgeable guy. He knows all the dates, all the names, and it was a very, very, very interesting conversation. And after the podcast, I also got a bunch of followers. So thank you, Baptiste. This was a pretty cool moment, yeah.
Very nice. Cool. Yeah, that sounds really, really memorable. Having a really interesting, remarkable guest on your podcast must be something that you remember for a long time, and which really amplifies your growth. And it's I love podcasting also because it's just about meeting people also.
Yeah.
So I've just started a podcast on Bitcoin in German. Just a hobby project, nothing too serious, but it's just like, it's so much fun just meeting people through podcasts, right? It's you put out the best you have to say while meeting someone else. And I mean, sure, I love meeting with friends and I love socializing with them, but what oftentimes happens when you meet friends is just like chilling out, not putting out the very best that one has to say. And I mean, maybe I'm a little bit special in my regard, but as a psychology student, social scientist, I'm particularly focused on verbal dynamics, I guess. I always try to put out the very best I have to say. I don't want to make it boring for people. I don't want to be. I mean, I have my own kind sense of humor, but I don't want to be talking about nonsense. I mean, it either has to be interesting or funny, you know. So
Yeah, I see.
yeah. So I just I just love podcasting also. It's a lot of fun meeting the people, networking with them, getting to know new people. That's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I think there's friends and friends. There's friends that I hang out with that I just want to talk bullshit and really don't use my brain and just have a good time. And then there are friends that I really like to have those deep conversations. So I think both are fine, basically. But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
The podcast is which allows you to bring the best conversation that you can have with new people. So I agree. How long have you been doing podcasts? That's so interesting.
I just started January, I guess.
Yeah.
Was the first podcast episode. And
how it's called?
B&L podcast. It's a German Bitcoin podcast.
Okay.
And so BANDL podcast. You'll find it on YouTube. And the other one, I'm going to be launching a mental health podcast also, because I am just building a mental health startup right now, you know. So, and these are the two topics I'm really passionate about, like mental health and Bitcoin, because mental health is quite an obvious one, right? I mean, everyone knows why it's important nowadays, at least in the Western world. Not everyone in the world, but at least most people in the Western world know. Destigmatizing it. But with Bitcoin, it's about financial enablement and also building a fairer economic system. I mean, most people don't realize that, okay, most people just don't have access to a banking system. So, for example, if you are a woman in Saudi Arabia, you cannot just go to the bank and open a bank account. Or if you are living somewhere in the rainforest, you cannot just open a bank account. So Bitcoin, in my opinion, is quite a bit about financial enablement, which is why I'm particularly interested in it. And yeah, sure, there are a lot of people who just are in it for the sake of making money, but those people just stick around for the ups and downs for a little bit, and then they get cold feet and they leave the game after making 20% wins or losses within a short period of time. But it's once you've understood it, you see how much it brings to humanity as a whole. But you have to delve into very many different topics in order to understand it. It's about economics, it's about cryptography, it's about politics, economic policy, and human psychology to some extent. So it takes a long time to understand as to why it is genius. And most people just delve in it for a couple of hours, which I did in the beginning also. But I mean, I realized it's brilliant once I've learned at least 150 hours about it, you know. So you really have to put in a lot of time, but it's worth it. It's fun. You learn a lot, and from a lot of different areas.
What makes you think that if there's someone living in the middle of the jungle, the rainforest, and they can't even open a bank account, what makes you think that they're gonna start a Bitcoin account?
Well, maybe first of all, maybe they don't need a bank account really, because maybe they are just farmers. This is one option. Maybe they have like an established system already. Like in Kenya, for example, they have something like this for like 10 years where you can just transfer money via SMS. It's crazy in Kenya. Yeah. I just learned that through a podcast guest on my Bitcoin podcast. He has a wife from Kenya, and they have a system there where you can just pay via SMS in cash. And this has been around for like 10, 15 years. And it was just needed because central banking is just not such big of a topic there, you know. So apparently you need good internet to establish something like that. But the third case is, okay, if there is, if you actually need money, and if you don't live somewhere like in Kenya, for example, where this is a third case where you actually get into Bitcoin because it's about anonymity. You know, the reason why a woman in Saudi Arabia, for example, cannot go to and open up a bank account, it's because she has to get permission from her husband, I suppose. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an expert about Saudi banking in Saudi Arabia, and I apologize if I'm wrong on this. I'm just taking this as to state an example. So there are certain people who are like excluded from opening up a bank account, and therefore Bitcoin is easier because anyone can create a Bitcoin address, you know.
Yeah, but Leo, I think that's a bad example, because if the wife is not allowed to have a bank account, what makes you think that the husband would be okay with her having a Bitcoin account? I think it's the same thing. The husband would not be happy at all if that's the case in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's why I said maybe the example is like suboptimal. But in other areas it's like, okay, you don't have access to it just because maybe the next bank where you have to go physically is like 50 kilometers away or something, you know. And it's not like everyone is super experienced with computers, for example, you know.
Yeah.
So but it is possible to create it from anywhere, not being dependent upon others, you know. This is the point of it. And also you are not obliged to political influences. So if a system breaks down or just allowed for a certain group of people, this is also where Bitcoin is independent from. So yeah, the example I stated in the beginning probably was not the best one. There are better ones to think of, just like, for example, if you get politically censored. If there's a right-wing politics in your country and they want to ban all the left-wings, or the other way around, you know. And yeah,
what I think
this would be another case.
Yeah. What I think what is appealing about it is what you said. What you said is not centralized. So your money is not on bank A or bank B. It's Bitcoin. It doesn't belong to anyone. So I think for me that would be the most appealing side of having Bitcoin. But the thing is, I don't see Bitcoin being a normal thing, like on the masses, like everyone has a credit card. I don't see everyone having a Bitcoin account nowadays because they don't need it. What I mean is they don't need it. You don't go to a coffee shop and it's more convenient to pay with Bitcoin. You don't go to the hairdresser and it's more you don't pay your electricity bill and it's more convenient to pay with Bitcoin or more advantageous. So I think while that's not the case, Bitcoin would be just a niche. Would you agree with that?
Well, I certainly agree to the notion that it's probably not going to become a payment system necessarily, just because, okay, it was envisioned to be used for micropayments and stuff, but it's like, okay, sure, it is cheaper to be sending something in Bitcoin for international transaction. It's way cheaper than sending it with Western Union, for example. And it's also highly traceable because in the blockchain everything is stored. So you are rather secure, and there have been cases where you have been able to bring back money. So coming back to your question, it's could you please restate it, because I lost my thought. There were too many possibilities opening up in my head.
No problem. So the question was, if you agree that Bitcoin will remain a niche until it becomes more convenient than a credit card or cash.
Yeah. Well, I think this depends upon how the tech behind it develops. So recently there has been an update where it has become very cheap to be sending transactions on Bitcoin. It's called Lightning Network. And I don't think it's going to replace credit cards per se, because credit cards is just one aspect of finance. And when you delve deeper into Bitcoin, you understand, okay, it is it's not only for payments, it's also for storing value, for example. So for example, there will only be 21 million Bitcoins, and if you keep your money in fiat cash, in like dollar, for example, they can wind the money supply, and which contributes to inflation. So if you keep $100 for like 10 years, okay, your purchasing power goes down. But the reason Bitcoin is going up in prices is because you have to, first of all, you have to put money, you have to put energy in to produce it, and energy is valuable. So it's not like you agree upon printing more dollars. Second of all, you have a limited supply of 21 million, and it gets cut in half every 4 years. So it's called halving time, and therefore these are the three factors contributing to the prices going up. Obviously also more demand for it, but so for example, if you would have kept one Bitcoin for like 10 years, okay, it would be way better than just keeping your $100, because it just goes down in purchasing power. And to me it's mostly about storing value rather than making payments, because when you pay with it, it's like why not pay in cash? I mean, why would I pay my coffee with like Bitcoin if Bitcoin gets more valuable all the time? But I put it in Bitcoin because it's a store of value and it cannot be taken away from me. So for example, you have this 24 phrases to protect your wallet, and it's unhackable. A computer would need 1,000 years to hack it. So it's much more likely you hack yourself into the White House than into a Bitcoin wallet.
Okay. So, man. So it's the safest way of owning money nowadays? Would you say it's Bitcoin? Safer than any bank?
Well, probably yes. Because there are some legislations in play. So for example, in Germany you say it's protected when you have your 10,000 or 100,000 euros, but it's like, are people really getting paid back? And what exactly was it? I remember 2008 when the banking crisis happened, and this is the reason Bitcoin was created. there was a report, for example, on TV. There was a 80-year-old lady, and someone had just sold her an insurance product, and then the banking crisis happened, and I cannot recall it correctly, so I don't want to ramble too much about something I've seen 15 years ago. But the point being is like, okay, you cannot always be 100% certain if you get your money back when a bank goes bankrupt. But with Bitcoin, you have your Bitcoin unless your wallet gets hacked or you lose your keys. But if you write down your keys, for example, your 24 keys for yourself, and make a copy of it, and for example give it to your mom, you should be quite safe. I mean, if you can trust your mom, but I hope you can trust your mom.
Wasn't there a guy who what was the story again? Let me see if I remember. He had like a bunch of Bitcoins saved in a hard drive, and I think he what was the story again? He just threw it away.
I remember this one.
Yeah, and then turns out he had yeah, go ahead. Do you know the story? I don't remember.
Yeah, so he had a very, very large sum of Bitcoins, but back when it was worth several cents, I think. So he had like 1,000 Bitcoins, but it was like worth like 20 cents back then, so $200. And he had produced this Bitcoins with his hard drive, and he has forgotten about Bitcoin, and then he threw his desktop PC away, and then all of a sudden Bitcoin is worth $50,000 a coin. Yeah, there we have it. And then he was in search of the hard drive. And in the beginning, because he threw the desktop PC away, he drove to all the places in the dumpsters, all the dumpsters in the UK by himself, and went through the trash,
Oh my god, that's crazy. I found it. The quest to find 181 million in Bitcoin buried in a dump. His name was James, I don't know if he's alive. James Howells is known as the man who accidentally threw away 8,000 Bitcoins. Now he has an 11 million master plan to get them back. Okay. Oh man, I'm sorry, guy. You're so.
Yeah, he looks quite grim.
I would be. Imagine losing that amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely bad karma.
So, how can someone start investing? Would you call that's the correct term? Investing on Bitcoin nowadays? What was the safest way, the easiest way? What do you recommend?
Well, I would recommend that. Sure, you buy your money on exchanges because it's the easiest way.
Okay.
I mean, they are more complicated ways, but as a beginner, I would just try to buy them on an exchange.
What do you mean by exchange? What is an exchange?
Yeah, so there are websites where you can buy Bitcoin and you pay them with your PayPal or with your credit card. It's, for example, Binance is the biggest exchange, and exchange means you can exchange your money for Bitcoin, or you can exchange your Bitcoin for other cryptocurrencies, and this is what an exchange is. And but you got to realize that if you have your exchange, the exchange owns the cryptocurrency, so technically it's not yours. So what is the next step to get the Bitcoin for yourself? Let me get this. I will show you into the camera.
Okay. Suspense.
No, no product placement, by the way. Just just something that I'm using on my own. It's a so-called ledger, and this is looks like an USB stick, right? Where you can just plug to your PC, and you can transfer your cryptocurrencies on this. And this way it is safe. You have your personal code to it, and then you can take it everywhere you go. And it's like fire resistant. I can hit on it. It's unbreakable. So this is a advanced way of storing it, because even if if an exchange goes bankrupt, your crypto is gone. But if you have it on your ledger, it's cannot be taken away from you, you know?
Well, what happens if you lose your ledger?
Well, sure, if you use your ledger, it's gone. But
Can you have copies of it, or can you only have one?
Well, you can have as many as you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the information that is in one ledger is just on that one. It's not like they are copies of each other.
Yeah, it's on multiple. It's on one, and it cannot be accessed elsewise. You know. So yeah. So this is rather safe way of doing it, because you might say, okay, like some exchange going bankrupt, doesn't happen too often, but then you haven't been into the crypto space for too long, you know. So for example, in 2011, there was a exchange. It was the biggest one at the time, and they had 99% of all bitcoins at the time that were in circulation, and they went bankrupt. So, and then there was it was called Mt. Gox, and then in 2021, if I recall it correctly, there was FTX. Have you heard about the story of FTX?
No. What happened?
Really not.
Oh.
This is 10 times more crazy and exciting than the story about the guy who lost his hard drive.
All right.
So, and there's even a Netflix series on it, FTX. So.
Oh, 1 second. I think I saw it. This is the guy who scams everyone, basically. He started with a car dealership.
Not quite, no.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So his name is Sam Bankman-Fried, and Sam is a really smart guy. He went to do his bachelor's in physics at Stanford, and both his parents are professors for law at Stanford. And he goes on to build a Bitcoin trading company called Alameda, and he becomes a multimillionaire doing so. And then he opens the biggest a crypto exchange called FTX, and he's so good at building the products that after several years he is, by the age of 28 back then, he had a net worth of $40 billion.
At 28, 40.
Yeah.
Dude. Okay.
And everyone, he is just like the poster boy of crypto. Everyone celebrates him. It's like,
what's his name again?
This guy, Sam Bankman-Fried.
Sam Bankman-Fried. Okay. Good for him. Good for him.
And the story goes on. Then there is the biggest crypto exchange called Binance, and the owner CZ, he writes a little bit about Sam Bankman-Fried online, that he's a little bit concerned about the safety of FTX, and you just see this as an attack from from the biggest player to the second biggest player. But then people realize, okay, there is maybe something a little bit wrong at FTX, so people start withdrawing their money, and people could only withdraw a very little amount of money, because after a certain while everything breaks down at FTX and no one can get their funds back. So after a while people are just shocked how second biggest crypto exchange can go down in flames within like 12 hours, you know, like and then an investigation starts and all the dirty details get out. Like, so for example, FTX, he was buying his parents' houses in the Bahamas, his parents who are both law professors. He was having some wild parties, taking drugs, only sleeping a couple of hours per night. He was the craziest story was he was on a call with an investor and they were talking to give his company $100 million to expand. And while talking to this investor, Sequoia Capital, Sam Bankman-Fried was just playing StarCraft all the time, you know? So he was was super smart, but he was also super crazy and beyond risk taking. And now he has like last week.
But come on, at 28, that's what you do. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what you do, sure. But it's like you got to see that. The main point is this guy just basically spent money from his customers that he didn't earn, and then he couldn't pay them back, and it was billions. It was billions of dollars, and then now he has been in jail for like 6 months. And last year they said he's going to stay there for 25 years in jail because he committed several crimes, fraud. Yeah.
Not good, Sam. But
yeah, from 50 billion, now he gets, I think, like $2.50 a week to buy himself a sandwich or something.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But you know, that's why I have trust issues with Bitcoin and all those cryptocurrencies, because you hear there's a scam happening here and there's another scam happening there. I also recently heard about Crypto Zoo by Logan. What was his name again?
Logan Paul?
Logan Paul. Yeah, another one who used Bitcoin in order to scam people. So, you know, you're not convincing me, Leo.
I mean, I was making a statement about crypto itself, not Bitcoin. And Bitcoin and crypto are two different things.
Okay.
Because, you know, Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and now there are more than 1 million cryptocurrencies, and they can be created within a few minutes. But, you know, Bitcoin took quite a while to be created as a technology, and now everyone is copying Bitcoin and making a few add-ons, thinking certain things can be solved more efficiently by other cryptos. And it's like, yeah, everything that other cryptos try to do, Bitcoin probably can also do if it develops further. So Bitcoin is different from the other cryptos because it's really truly decentralized. You know, it's not controlled by some CEOs and all those crypto projects. They have a CEO, and oftentimes you can argue, okay, probably this guy did just some decisions to make himself richer, just like you see with Sam Bankman-Fried, you know.
So when you say Bitcoin is not centralized, there's truly no one managing it. So everything's done automatically. What happens, let's say, in 20 years? The Bitcoin should be managed automatically, and won't the code or anything be outdated?
Sure. I mean, this is the point about Bitcoin. It's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that needs no intermediary. So you don't need a third party. And usually, if one person sends to the other cash, you need the bank. But Bitcoin is anti-banks because the inventor saw the banking crisis and thought to himself, there must be a better system about it. So it's like, if you want to send Bitcoin, there's a miner, and the miner, he validates the transaction, and he gets a little reward for it, which is why he does it. But the miner itself also produces the currency, the Bitcoin, by mining, by putting in energy. And anyone can become a miner. You just have to buy the hardware to do so. So you see it is distributed amongst much more entities, because you only have so many banks, but everyone who is a miner is part of the system, and he is part of the system in the sense that he is producing it, but he's also validating it, the transactions, and he gets a little reward for doing so. So like decentralization, mining, those are the two key things to understand about Bitcoin, as to why it is truly decentralized. And did I explain it understandably?
Yeah, but you see, so use graphic cards in order to mine, right? I remember that there was a graphic cards shortage, so chip shortage for a while. Everyone's like, oh, how are we gonna mine? Everyone's buying graphic cards, NVIDIA graphic cards in order to mine. But the thing is, the graphic cards are just getting better and better. That means that if I have amazing graphic cards, I'll be able to mine more than someone who has a worse graphic card.
Oh, that's a very good question. I think this might be the case, but I'm not too sure. So I would guess so. Yes, I would guess so. But let me think about it. I think it's. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna look it up because that's interesting. Better. There's a better graphic card. Increases. I don't know, Bitcoin mining. Let's see what the internet says. So a GPU, or a graphic processing unit, is responsible for the digital rendering in a computer system. Does to a GPU power potential versus Okay, so due to a GPU's power potential versus a CPU, or central processing unit, they have become more useful in blockchain mining due to their speed and efficiency. Okay, I'm not sure if this answered the question though.
Yeah, to some extent, and I was bouncing a little bit back and forth with the question, because you didn't put a time frame on it. And I mean, if you would say in the moment getting a better graphic card, I guess it would improve the mining performance. But if you see it over time, it's like the reward gets cut in half every 4 years that you get for mining, the halving.
Yeah.
It's just dependent upon so many different factors, and this is also what makes Bitcoin quite exciting, because you just get into it and it's intersected to so many different fields that you just go back and forth. We call it the rabbit hole, going down the rabbit hole.
I love doing it. I saw not long time ago, there was this guy, he was creating and selling heaters, home heaters, but with graphic cards inside, something like that, and they would mine Bitcoins for you, but at the same time they would get hot and they will hit your house. So at the same time you're heating your flat, you're mining Bitcoin. It was like,
okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, definitely. That's a very interesting idea. That reminds me a little bit of the plan by Nayib Bukele. He's the president of El Salvador, and he introduced Bitcoin to be the payment in his country, and his where he's president. So when he was introducing it, he had the plan to be building the Bitcoin miners next to the volcanoes that are spread throughout the country.
Come on, that's some James Bond villain type of shit. Right?
I mean, you would think so, but yeah, then I mean, he's sort of a very adventurous guy, this Nayib Bukele. I mean, he's a brave man to be introducing Bitcoin as a first payment option for a country worldwide. So then the price of Bitcoin dropped too much, also because of Sam Bankman-Fried, because he did some nasty things. And then he had to cancel, Nayib Bukele had to cancel the plans about building the mining next to some volcanoes.
Man, that would be I would go there just to see this. That sounds incredible.
Yeah. Must be fun traveling to El Salvador.
So right now in El Salvador, that's already the case. You can only use Bitcoin.
Yeah, you can. But I mean, there's obviously a weakness coming into play, because last summer I even met a woman from El Salvador while traveling, and I was really excited. I was like, I'm so glad to meet someone finally from El Salvador. So I was asking her about Bitcoin, and her response was, yeah, we don't use it really. And I was asking, okay, why? And she was like, okay, we are a poor country with no economic surplus. And that made a lot of sense to me, because, yeah, you should have a surplus to invest it into Bitcoin. Because if you have your local currency and you're just spending it to get by, why would you buy Bitcoin if you're just spending it in your local currency either way, you know? Makes no sense. So you just would have to go Bitcoin only in order to make it really solution to pay. But yeah, it has become a store of value for people. And you see this a lot. So for example, if you want to see a crazy chart, you can type in like the pound from Lebanon versus Bitcoin, and you just, it's not like this, it's like this kind of chart, because once there is a lot of inflation, Bitcoin is a really good way of storing your value. Because if you have like a hyperinflation, like you have in Lebanon right now, it's quite beneficial to be storing your money in Bitcoin and not your local currency like the Lebanon pound.
Mm-hmm. For how many years have you been buying Bitcoins?
Well, I started it in like 2021, and yeah, so this is when I first got into it.
Have you seen huge profits since then?
I mean, to be honest, I haven't made really money off it, in the sense that I've not made profit of it technically. Like I said, I've just started building my own business, and I have invested the crypto that I had in order to build my own business. So it has gone into another venture, because I think it is important to invest into some assets like Bitcoin, but it's even more important to be investing into yourself. And even though I do believe in the long-term future of Bitcoin, I also believe in my startup idea, you know.
All right.
So, which is why I decided to invest what I had into developing an app and a startup. So
you have a startup, and tell us about it.
Sure. So yeah, where should I start? I like to start with a little story to it, because oftentimes when you hear these startups, it's just like, oh, you know, we are this and we do that, and oftentimes they compared. We are like Uber, but for pizza. We are like whatever, you know.
And we're gonna change the world. Like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I like to start with a little bit of background story. So I was starting, and I'm telling this background story because it shows my aspiration. You know, it shows as to why I'm very passionate about building it, and I think listeners might be able to resonate with it. So I was quitting my job in order to become a psychotherapist. It's been a dream of mine to become one for several years. And I started studying, did good, worked a little bit, got some first-hand experiences working in psychiatries. And then after some while, the more you learn about mental health disorders, the more you also ask yourself, okay, does this apply to me or does this apply to anyone else? And while studying, okay, I learned more about ADHD, and I figured, okay, I'm pretty certain I have ADHD. The more I learn about it, the more it makes sense to me. Like, I have problem with paying attention, and it's been like this my whole life. But no one even considered it to be ADD, because I was always getting good grades and being well adjusted in school, and didn't cause too much trouble. But I got when I went to a psychiatrist, I got the diagnosis of ADHD, and ever since the diagnosis, my life has been gotten better a ton.
How many years ago was this?
1.5 years ago.
Okay.
So, it has gotten way better in every aspect, you know. I'm much more balanced in everything. I have gotten much better at directing my life, and I had a good life before, but my life has just improved so much. So technically you could be saying, I've missed out on something. Why have I not been diagnosed? I'm 31 right now. That was when I was 29. Why haven't I been diagnosed when I was like 8? And I don't want to ask myself the question, what would be if? I don't want to ask myself, okay, what would be if I would have been diagnosed at 8? This just is you could always ask yourself, as why didn't I get diagnosed earlier? But it has inspired me in the sense that I just thought to myself, okay, the mental health care system has to be improved upon a ton. And I've been passionate about mental health before, but after that I went even more passionate about mental health. So I went to like ADHD Germany, which is like a corporation, or like rather an NGO. And I was like, okay, I want to work for you. And they are like, yeah, you know, we have 2 full-time employees and 2 volunteers, and you can be a volunteer as well.
Dude, that's all? Just 4 people working there?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I would expect like 100.
Yeah, no, just 4 people. And then I was like, okay, but can I expect to get paid something because I'm living in Cologne and I'm having a private expensive university ahead of me? No, sorry, we can't pay you anything. So I was like, okay, what do I do now? Maybe I apply to some mental health companies. So I did, but there are very few in Germany. Quite a few of them are actually in the US. And whilst I'm in the process of it,
what do you mean by mental health companies?
Well, there are some mental health companies, like for example Self-P in Berlin, and they do some apps for like psychotherapy, for example. So if you have depression, you can download it, and your health insurance pays for it.
Got it. Okay.
Some program based, and right now there are quite a few apps. Some in the US, they work on tech. So there's a very shout out to Llama Life. I have no ties to them, and I don't get any money from them, but I just do a shout out to them because I really found the startup quite fascinating, you know. So she has ADHD as well, and she has trouble organizing her work, so she designed something where you can organize your work tasks more efficiently, and she's programmed a little like there's a way you can organize your work. It's called Pomodoro technique. So you do, like, if you have trouble paying attention, you do 25 minutes, 5 minutes break, 25 minutes, 5-minute breaks. And she has developed a tool where you just digitize that. So, and this can be integrated into several devices. And this is one example of, like, tech helping people with mental health disorders. So it can be tech-based, it can help with therapy, something like that.
Got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
is this tool available on the App Store? Hey, can anyone download it?
Yeah, anyone can download it. Llama Live, for
Llama
example.
Live, okay.
Yeah, that's quite handy. I really recommend it to anyone because, yeah, I have ADHD myself and just sometimes also have trouble organizing. But coming back to my journey, so yeah, there we have it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was applying to all these companies, but it's like, okay, they are open talking to me, but they are not very open with hiring, just because, like, 1 year ago or something, they are in a recession. Very few people are hiring. Like Llama Live, for example, has like 5 employees or something. Why would they hire someone from Germany? And I think to myself, okay, NGOs is not a thing. The startup you have applied at, most of which you find interesting, and most of them are based in the US either way. Why not start something on your own? You're so passionate about the topic itself, you know? You love it. You love it. I work every day, long hours, but most of the stuff I do doesn't really feel like work because I just love what I do. And then I thought to myself, okay, I want to do something about ADHD. I want to build an ADHD platform. Then I was like, okay, this is not big enough. I want to do something about ADHD and autism because oftentimes people have the 2 conditions at the same time. And then I gathered some people around me. So I started looking for co-founders. And I texted everyone on Twitter that had psychology and IT in their bio.
Good way to go. It works,
Yeah.
right?
It does.
Yeah.
And it does specifically because, you know, Twitter, it's known a lot for, like, in Germany, a lot of people always criticize for, like, political views, like, oh, it's right wing or whatever. And but Twitter is also a lot about some people that are very nerdy in their topics, you know, very nerdy. And it's very text-based, so you get a lot of scientists, a lot of nerds, which is great. And when you text someone that has psychology and IT in their bio, you can be rather sure they are quite profound in both areas. So I texted everyone, met some people, and this is how I met my co-founder, Jefta. And in the beginning, there was also a woman called Puno on board from India, but she was already working as a doctor and doing a master's degree also at the same time, which is crazy. And then founding a startup. Okay, I mean, what can you do? You know, like, founding a startup is like going all in as much as you can, but yeah, then she quit, and now it's just it's me and Jefta, and we've built an app that is going to be launching soon. It's about booking mental health services with psychotherapists, so online therapy basically. And then we are getting into data analytics, so that means we are raising data for psychology research, And the third pillar is AI training. So an AI that helps with when you just need someone to talk to, and this helps you to navigate the Beyond You ecosystem. So the startup is called Beyond You, beyond-u.net, and it's just really about improving mental health worldwide, and which is something I'm really passionate about. And it's like, when nowadays a lot of people talk about purpose, and a lot of people think, what is my purpose here in life? We live in a very rich Western world. What brings us to work every day? And I just think to myself, okay, I'm so passionate about it because I've not led the optimal life because I was later diagnosed with ADHD. But then I'm even getting in contact through Twitter with some NGOs, and I'm in contact with some orphanages who are on the autism spectrum in Uganda. So it's like disabled children in Africa. And it's like, okay, I'm trying to build up cooperations with them. And this just opened up my heart, because it's like you get up in the morning and you just think to yourself, okay, if I work harder and if I make more money, I can just 10x my impact, like if I do it in a wise way and people are being honest with me, if I will come with good intentions and build a solution for them, help them get access to mental health, it's just phenomenal what you can do as a Westerner. And I don't do that, I don't say that because I'm being narcissistic about it, I'm grandiose or whatever. It just fills my heart with a lot of purpose, The morning I get up, I'm just like, okay, I know what I'm working for. I'm here to improve mental health care worldwide. This is why I got up this morning every day. I just love it. I love the journey.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Not everyone knows what they want to do with their life, so it's very motivating to hear that you did. So congrats, man. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
How often autism and ADHD overlap?
Well, if I recall the statistics correctly, it's like if someone has autism, I think they are like 10 times more likely to have ADHD.
10 times more.
Yeah, something like that. I might be off, and it might vary from study to study, but something like that. Yeah. So it's quite common, and it also historically it's often been confused quite a bit. I mean, throughout my life, I have ADD, and oftentimes I was asked, or several times I was asked in my life if I'm on the autism spectrum, just because I'm oftentimes all dreamy, I mean, I can be very engaged in a conversation, but since I have trouble with paying attention, I'm just sometimes like, I'm shifting a lot, but it's like I try my best, but I cannot do elsewise sometimes. And people see this sudden changes in reactions, and it's like, if you would put it in one word, it's like dreamy or being in your own world sometimes. And so ADHD and autism oftentimes also get confused, even historically seen even by medical professionals. But as science progresses, they get more educated, it does not get confused anymore that often.
Well, I hear that sometimes you say ADHD and sometimes you say just ADD. Why is that?
Yeah. So it's called, in the long form, it's called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And that means it's measured on 2 dimensions. You are having trouble with attention, and you're having trouble with hyperactivity. So not being able to pay attention, and hyperactivity being too active, not being able to calm down. to put it in simple terms. And historically, you would say you can have hyperactivity only, you can have attention problems only, or you can have both. If you have both, you have ADHD. If you have only attention problems, you have ADD. And I only have ADD, but now in the new way of describing, of diagnosing people, everything is just ADHD. Because the idea is, okay, both of them influence each other. If you have trouble paying attention, sometimes you drift into hyperactivity. Or if you are super hyperactive, you have trouble paying attention. So now it's more common sense that it's connected. But I like to use the old terms sometimes, even though maybe I shouldn't do it when I'm speaking strictly as a aspiring psychology student. But I feel like I'm not too represented with ADHD because I have ADD. I have trouble paying attention, and it's been my whole life. And I'm a very extreme case of not being able to pay attention, and this is why in school people often describe me as dreamy or something like that, clumsy, something. This is what a lot of people attributed me to be, and I was suffering from it, to be honest, because I was considered someone that is not cautious enough, I would say. This is what people often would say. You're not cautious enough. You're not cautious enough. Be more calm. Hey, relax.
Come on, that's your problem. Why people are judging you so much? Who are those
this
people?
Is what happens. This is what happens when you have ADHD. It has been researched that if you have ADHD, you get criticized much more than as if you don't have ADHD.
Really? Okay.
And yeah, I mean, if you get criticized a lot in your life for the minor things, even like the minor things, hey, keep calm, pay attention, look here, don't look there. Hey, don't touch this, don't do that, don't do that. Oh, haha, you're an idiot, don't fall, haha. Like all those little comments, they mountain up, and I mean, right now I'm 31, I have gotten over it, but when I self-reflect on it, and when I also see other people that have gone through it, the reason it is a disorder is that it leads to worse life circumstances. It leads to having worse performance in school, but it can also be very beneficial when you find your passion and you're truly passionate about it, and you just it shouldn't be a limit. You shouldn't think that this is everything to you, and this is my message to all people that have ADHD. Yeah, it's part of describing some behavioral tendencies of yours, but it's not like that you are ADD or ADHD, and it's not like this is all to you. There's more to you than you think,
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I agree. I mean, you just mentioned that Elon Musk has autism or ADHD, and look what he's doing. Asperger's, and look what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays you also shouldn't say Asperger's, because he stated he has Asperger's, but Asperger was did some crimes in the Third Reich, and this has just recently come out, so you shouldn't say Asperger's anymore. But when I say Elon Musk says he has Asperger's, it's a quote by him. So he's on the autism spectrum, apparently. This is the point, yeah.
All right. I have a feeling that a lot of people have ADHD nowadays, to the point that I even heard online, that's not me saying, I heard online that it has become trendy to claim that you have ADHD. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic to discuss, because a lot of people confuse two different things. It's so on the one hand you have ADHD, and on the other hand you have the overall declining ability to pay attention. So the average attention span of humans has just gone down. We've gone from like 12 seconds to 8 seconds. So we are just, our attention span is shorter. We are just switching every 8 seconds. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we have ADHD. This means that we are just adapting what is happening around us. Because back in the days, it's like, okay, you maybe get 2 phone calls and 2 SMS, and now you get 100 WhatsApps and 50 mails and 50 Discord notifications. So you just should react faster, which is why the attention span itself is going down. And this is just a demand that is coming to all human beings. But I wouldn't necessarily call this ADHD, because when the attention span of every human being is lowering overall, like the average is lowering, it's not like everyone is getting ADHD. You have ADHD when you are in the worst percentile of doing certain things which are attributed to your attention. So for me, for example, it was like I often misplaced things. I often hurt myself by being inattentive, something like that. So you could say that I had certain behavioral tendencies that led to hurting myself, and this was due to my inattentiveness, something like that. So there's actual harm happening, but it's not like, okay, or I just feel overstimulated all the time. This is not something like harm happening itself. So to put it in a nutshell, your question, it's like overall attention spans are just going down. This is just can be seen everywhere, and it's not like everyone has ADHD, and you do have ADHD when you see you really are in the bottom few percentile in certain areas, in certain areas. But this is a really interesting part about neurodiversity then again. Okay, you have your weaknesses, but sometimes you can think of the weaknesses and see, okay, this is really a strength if you turn it the other way around. So I might be inattentive, but I am really able to zoom in when I'm focused on something, and then I'm just like very productive. I'm hyper focused, and this is a term used in ADHD and autism research quite a bit, even though it still has to be more clearly what hyper focus really is. So I'm laser focused on it when I'm interested on it, and when I'm not, it's hard for me to manage. I have to find a way to make it work. So oftentimes you see this, it's just a mental construct, to be honest, if it's a disorder or not. And oftentimes when you see the biggest weakness of it, that when you turn it around, it's also sometimes a strength, to some degree. I mean, I don't want to downplay that there are certain people suffering. If someone cannot speak from autism, sure, it's hard to make a good case for that. But for a lot of people, you can actually make a good case. And people are just really, some are just really extreme in the way they view the world. Something that might be interesting to you as well is like, there's a guy who knows the number pi by the 30,000.
I saw it.
Yes,
It's crazy.
you know Daniel Tammet. Yes.
So he has ADHD, basically autism.
No. He has autism.
Okay.
Not ADHD, and it's crazy. He knows pi by the 30,000 syllable. He was able to learn Icelandic within a week, and was able to perform a interview on Icelandic television, being interviewed in Icelandic language. but he cannot drive a car because coordination is not his strength. You know, that's it's crazy to think. Daniel Tammet, he's a very, very fascinating human being. Yeah.
What's his name again? Daniel?
Daniel Tammet. Daniel Tammet.
All right. I didn't know his name. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's the price you pay, right? Nothing's free. Everything has a balance. It's like the yin yang. You are a genius here, but you need to trade off somewhere. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if you can apply it to all the cases, but certainly for quite a few individuals you can do that. And overall it's just like, okay, when you have a disorder such as ADHD or autism, it's like, okay, you can be focusing all the time on what your weaknesses are, but this just really can create a negative self-image. So therefore, occasionally it should also be quite important to ask yourself what your strengths are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, otherwise your self-esteem just goes down the hill. So it is people think they have ADHD a lot nowadays, if I understood correctly, because their attention span is going down because of social media and stuff. That's why everyone thinks they have ADHD. How can people snap out of it and see that they don't have ADHD? Is there an easy way to confirm, okay, I don't have ADHD, it's just my attention span that's low?
Well, so, I mean, there are screening tests online. You can do some tests online and they say, okay, it is unlikely that you have ADHD. It is a little bit likely, or it is very likely that you have ADHD as a result. And this should help as a first orientation. And with getting really clear on it, sometimes you have to get diagnosed. And specifically, sometimes if people are older, it's sometimes really tough to see because oftentimes people with ADHD that are a little bit older, they have found mechanisms to work against it. So,
like
for
what?
example, for me, I mean, the fidgeting with the arm is quite common, you know, like you fidget with your leg, or you just force yourself really hard to do something, but you just have to put in much more effort because one has ADHD. And it has, you cannot see it so much more on the outside, but it's rather something on the inside. It has gotten to the point that there's a NGO like ADHD International, I think, if I recall it correctly, and they have head of the organization who's a medical doctor, and he is has an assistant who's also a medical doctor, and they worked together for like 5 years, and the head of the NGO did not realize that his assistant had ADHD all the time, even though they work at the biggest ADHD NGO worldwide, you know.
Get out of here. Really?
Yeah.
All right. It was just in front of him. I never noticed. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, coming back to your question about how people can snap out of it, I would probably say do a screening test online and then you know better, you know? Because oftentimes what people do when they hear a certain disorder, and this applies to everything with mental health, you know, not only ADHD. They have one behavioral tendency and they think, okay, this behavioral tendency is very common in ADHD, for example. And then they think, oh, I have this behavioral tendency and it's very strong and I must have ADHD for that reason. But oftentimes when you have a diagnosis like ADHD, you have a lot of different behavioral patterns that have to be fulfilled. It's not only one. And the reason that you are doing something, it can be attributed to so many things, you know? So
that's why it's important to be diagnosed.
Yeah, to be diagnosed and also see a lot of different factors being summarized. Like it's about, if you have ADHD, it's not one behavior, but it's about 70 behaviors.
Phew. 70.
So,
It can get that high? Up to 70?
I mean, at least this is what you statistically need in order to make a judgment. So in Germany, when you do the screening test, you get like 100 questions, if I remember correctly. So 100 questions about how you behave in certain situations, and then they make a judgment. And this is just an example of how complex it is. So in all of Cologne, there are 2 doctors who can do the diagnoses. And there's a lot of controversy about it, like you said, with attention span in general. But yeah, like I said, it's about attention span overall just declining in humanity. And
a friend of mine said that one of the symptoms is that whenever she drinks energy drinks, it just calms her down, and that means it's one of the reasons why she has ADHD. Sorry, it's not one of the reasons why she has ADHD, but it's one of the symptoms that happens when you have ADHD. Have you heard about this before?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Yeah?
And it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, very, very common, very
Really?
common.
Wow.
So you don't get super energized when you drink coffee or have energy drinks. It's just like you are sort of in a Zen state. And I realized this also when I was before I was diagnosed. So by Zen state, I mean something like you just feel very calm and normal. And I mean, when people that don't have ADHD and they are normal, and then so either they are tired and they drink a coffee and they feel normal, or they feel normal and drink a coffee and feel very uplifted, like energetic.
Mm-hmm.
But people with ADHD, they can drink tons. Quite a few of them can drink tons of coffee without getting any enthusiastic, because so when I don't know the exact mechanisms behind how coffee work, but the reason, like biologically with ADHD, is like you have a lack of dopamine in your prefrontal cortex, so in the front part of your brain. And with coffee, it gets stimulated. But when you're already having a lack of this in your brain, coffee doesn't give too much help. It's just you are getting to a normal level. And if you're getting to a normal level, okay, you're just like a normal human being. But you don't get all hyped up. So, yeah, that's quite common in people with ADHD.
I see. So you need to take Ritalin, right, in order to get the dopamine that you need.
Yeah, but also not to hype you up, but rather to get to a normal level. And when it gets to a normal level, you can concentrate better, and you're not as fidgety, hyperactive anymore. And also people get more centered in themselves. It's not shifting as much. The attention, like being scattered all over the place. It's not like you have to take Ritalin, but it's recommended by doctors. But some people don't like it. Some people don't respond to it. And I mean, if you don't respond to it, it's it's also pretty interesting, because, or if you don't have any effect from it, if you get prescribed Ritalin and you don't have any effect from it, it can be the case that you actually don't have ADHD, or that you don't respond to Ritalin. So this is a tricky one.
Oh, so it can get even more confusing.
Yeah, it can, and I'm oftentimes shocked about how little knowledge there is in society about it. I mean, specifically with like mental health and ADHD also, it's like a couple of days I was in a discussion on Twitter just out of fun, and some of the guys was calling it like cocaine for kids or something, like Ritalin.
For God's sake, cocaine for kids.
Yeah, and I just found it ridiculous because it just shows how little how little knowledge he has about it, you know. And I mean, just imagine like, I don't know, someone with a heart disease getting medication, and someone just calls it amphetamine for the adults, or amphetamine for the elderly people, or whatever. I don't know, like.
Oh,
I don't
man.
know.
Okay, but
Mental health has to-
you cannot deny that's funny though.
It's kind of funny, but it's also comical, you know.
Yeah.
It's also tragical. I mean, yeah, it's both.
You know,
I can laugh about it, but I'm also concerned by it.
you know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no worries. Just say what you want to say.
You know, something that annoys me is that going back to this trendy aspect again, everyone says, "Oh, I have ADHD. I don't know. I cannot concentrate." And but then you see what the person is eating, just trash. Do you ask if the person is exercising? No, they're not. Do you ask about their internet habits? They stay on TikTok until 3 a.m. every night. So, do you have ADHD, or your lifestyle is just so shitty that makes that's influencing your life negatively in so many aspects, and you just find this easy excuse to not fix your lifestyle, you know? So my question would be, if someone has this kind of lifestyle, they're basically not taking care of themselves, and they assume they have ADHD, would be one of those online tests actually help?
Yeah, because the behavioral tendencies, it's filtered out if lifestyle has an influence on it. If it's a good screening test. I mean, obviously the screening test itself is not a definite answer to the question, but it gives a rough indication. And for example, one of the tests from the actual diagnostic test, it's like, okay, when I sit on an airplane and I want to fly from A to B, it's very tough for me to sit still. This is one of the questions, and it's like, okay, I think this is one example of something that is quite independent from how you eat or how your media consumption is, you know. I mean, largely. I mean, sure, at the end of the day, all the behaviors are influenced by how you eat and how your media consumption is. But the question, the task for psychology research is to find like items that are not as much influenced by these external factors, you know.
Makes sense. So the psychologists and the test, they try to find the actual neurodivergency. They try to exclude this. Okay. But I think,
Yes, now we're back. Now we're live.
all right, sorry guys, we had a little frame rate drop there. So what I was saying, So what I was saying is basically, can you actually separate sport and diet from like the way you behave and your neurodivergency? Is this even possible? Because as far as you know, lifting weights and doing sports, like those are medicine for your brain. Going outside, being on the sun. I think regardless of ADHD, you're gonna have a way better life and less anxiety if you do those things, you know.
Yeah, definitely it does help. And I mean, it is possible to better your concentration even without medication. The question is, what kind of lifestyle are you leading already? I mean, for example, for me, I was having all those issues with concentration, even though I was living a very healthy life. I was eating good, I was doing sports and stuff. But certainly you can get better in your, not everyone, but quite a few people with sufficient training, with sports where you balance a lot, like yoga, for example. And this works for quite a lot of people. Eating well, doing yoga, meditation also is quite good. So I do all these things, even though I do take medication. And I mean, I might consider not taking medication at some point, because there's some scientific evidence for, if you take Ritalin for a long time, your brain activity might get to a normal level. So with people that have normal attention spans, it's like this, and for people that have ADHD, it's like this.
Well, okay.
And when you take Ritalin, you might get to normal attention levels.
It's more like a soft curve.
Right. It's like I see something, I focus it, and then I relax. But when you have ADHD, and I also realize it in my personal visual perception, it's all blurry, you know. Oftentimes, like, I'm drunk, even though I'm not drunk, and it's hard to focus something visually. So when you take Ritalin for a long enough time, there's some growing evidence that your attention spans can get to normal levels, you know. So you're basically training your brain a little bit with Ritalin to get normal again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. But okay, so you train your brain over time, and then he starts producing dopamine by itself.
Yeah, or you get to normal levels of dopamine, in the sense that before there was a lack of dopamine, which why you wasn't able to pay attention. You weren't able to pay attention, but now you can. But on the flip side, you know, a lot of students, they take Ritalin in order to study more effectively, even though they don't have ADHD. And it's quite fascinating to see that actually this doesn't work, like, as far as science sees it, because you get like a sort of a placebo effect. It's like, you think if you don't have ADHD and you take Ritalin, you think you study more effectively, but actually you don't. And for me, at least, I realized that my grades were actually getting better after diagnosis.
Okay.
So this is like one facet of it, you know. Yeah.
But going back to the training your brain part,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we take cocaine, an example, or any other hard drug, I would expect the opposite. You're actually training your brain not to produce the chemical that you're taking. So every time you need to take even more of the drug in order to have the same effect. Why that's not the case with Ritalin?
Why it is not the case with Ritalin? Well, it comes down to several factors. So what I was talking about is also tied to another factor. So when people take Ritalin, it might be the case that your levels of concentration are tied to the level of dopamine in your brain. And because you don't have sufficient level of dopamine, you are all fuzzy. You're not able to pay attention. But when you have normal level, you can focus in a good manner. But when you are at a normal level and you overshoot, you're not paying attention either. And with cocaine, it's like, okay, dopamine, Ritalin acts that the that acts in the way that dopamine can go through can be transmitted through your brain in a better way. But with cocaine, it acts in the way that more dopamine and more serotonin are released at the same time. And this is something completely different. In the one point, it's about transmission, but with cocaine, it's about dopamine and serotonin being released at the same time. And this is a very different output of taking the substance itself.
Okay, so Ritalin is basically taking a brainwave that is already there and just calming it down, and cocaine is basically just telling your brain to release a lot of other chemicals that normally are not being produced.
Well, the dopamine and serotonin are already there.
I see.
But with Ritalin, you have the transmission gets better. So it gets easier from A to B. And with cocaine, it's just released, and it also stays there and doesn't go back to its normal place. It's like very much concentrated in one spot, which is why you feel all hyped up.
I see. Damn, that's so interesting. Leo, I have one more question for you, and then I would say let's wrap it up. It's almost like 11. Is borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder considered neurodivergencies?
No, it is not considered neurodivergence, because the difference with borderline personality disorder, for example, you can only diagnose it at a later age, when someone is like 18 in most cases, and you are not necessarily born with it. You're rather it's dependent upon your biology, but also your family history and social circumstances, traumatic experiences also. And you call it neurodiversity because you are, the theory is that from a child on you have ADHD or autism. You don't get autism by the age of 20. You have it, when you have it, you have had it as a child. Same applies for ADHD as well, which is why it's important to look into the childhood diagnosis. And in order to make people, not exclude people with ADHD and autism that have had it their whole life, you say neurodivergence, because they see the world with different patterns, and you can make some evidence for their positive aspects of it. And with borderline, you could also make some positive cases in the sense, okay, they can experience emotions more intensely, but overall, borderline is more about deficits in emotional regulation and also how they lead relationships, and therefore you wouldn't call it neurodiversity. I mean, yeah. As far as I'm concerned, you wouldn't call it, put it under the umbrella term of neurodiversity. No.
So, which umbrella would it belong to?
Well, it is part of personality disorders, and
okay, yeah, makes sense. Okay, yeah, all right.
But borderline and ADHD intersect quite a bit, you know. They can both have impulsive tendencies occasionally, not all of them all the time, but more often than not this occurs, and therefore they are often women are misdiagnosed between ADHD and borderline. they are told they have borderline, but actually they have ADHD. This is quite prevalent. But yeah, even though there are some things overlapping, it's not the same, and you have to draw a border at some point, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because there are other aspects to borderline also, which don't have too much to do with how you perceive the world necessarily. It's more about how you regulate emotions on the inside, I guess, which is what people with borderline really struggle with.
I see.
Mhm.
Man, I could continue. I still have so many questions. I'd like to ask you about psychosis and I'd like to go on. Maybe next time. Leo, it has been a pleasure. Do you have any last remarks, anything else that you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
Well, it has just been a pleasure being with you here on the podcast. I've had so much fun talking. I really love this style of communicating where you're just throwing out your thoughts and not being too structured in the approach itself. So I really thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And yeah, if people want to hear and see more of me, just search Leo Koesters online. I'm mostly active on Twitter, but getting into the YouTube and Instagram game also soon more. And beyond-u.net will also be launching soon. You can find a little bit of resources from us on Twitter, but on X. But we are expanding on other channels soon as well. And yeah, it just was so much fun being here. Thanks a lot, Bru. And I'm looking forward to being here, hopefully a second time at some point.
Of course, let's make it happen live.
Yes.
You are also from Germany. Come to the studio, man.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
When you are in Bielefeld, right? You are in Bielefeld?
I'm in Gütersloh. It's like
Gütersloh.
1 second from Bielefeld. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that one. I've been to Gütersloh quite a few times. I'm from
What?
Rheine. I'm from Rheine, you know. Rheine is like 1 or 2 hours from Gütersloh, you know. So, yeah.
Interesting. What are you doing, Gütersloh? That's crazy. It's such a small town, folks. For those who don't know about it, so it's I'm flabbergasted.
You've Gary Weber, right?
What?
Or is it still a thing? Or well, back when I was like a teenager, you had Gary Weber, the fashion something. I don't know if they went if they closed their business at some point, but they were quite big and they were from Gütersloh, I think. But I might be off. But I know where Gütersloh is anyways, and I will think of you, Bru, when I'm around to step by into your podcast studio and shoot an episode.
All right, let's make it happen. Leo,
Yes.
thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. Guys, if it's your first time watching, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that podcasts will be recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Check out now the BruCast store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies, from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock. Set the trend. Buy now at bru-cast.com/store. I repeat, bru-cast.com/store. Link on the description below. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now BruCast on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Of course, links on the description below. Leo, it has been a pleasure. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.